The soft, almost meditative hum of the Boeing 777's engines was a familiar comfort for me, a seasoned road warrior whose second home was often seat 12B on a cross-country flight. Today, though, I was in first class, a rare, well-deserved upgrade, on Flight 727, New York to Los Angeles. The cabin was a cocoon of understated luxury, plush leather seats, the gentle clink of crystal glasses, and the whispered conversations of business moguls. The pre-flight champagne, a crisp, bubbly elixir, was already doing its magic, easing the last vestiges of a hectic week. Then she arrived. Ms. Sterling. Her designer suit seemed to practically hum with ambition, tailored to perfection, probably. Cost more than my car. Her heels clicked sharply on the aisle, a rhythmic, almost aggressive counterpoint to the cabin's hushed tranquility. She moved with an undeniable self-importance, a polished veneer that screamed, "I own this space." Her phone was glued to her ear, a constant stream of corporate jargon punctuated by sharp, decisive commands. She was, in short, a force to be reckoned with, or so she clearly believed. She found her seat, 3A, right next to mine, a prime spot. Across the aisle, another passenger settled into 3C. He was an anomaly, not just in first class, but anywhere, that screamed luxury. His clothes were worn, practical, a faded, almost threadbare work jacket that looked like it had seen countless chilly mornings, and sturdy scuffed boots. He carried an old canvas duffel bag, lumpy and well-traveled, a stark contrast to the sleek leather briefcases and designer carry-ons surrounding us. He looked tired, yes, but also intrinsically real, like a person who had spent his life dealing with the tangible world, not just abstract numbers. He reminded me of the diligent janitors I'd see at my own office, meticulously cleaning long after everyone else had gone home. Ms. Sterling, mid-rant about synergy and leveraging assets, finally ended her call with an emphatic, almost violent, absolutely non-negotiable. She then turned, her eyes sweeping over the cabin before landing on the man beside me. Her perfect smile faltered. A flicker of disdain, sharp and undeniable, crossed her face. She let out a dramatic, audible sigh, loud enough to cut through the general hum of the cabin, as if his mere existence was an insult to her expensive seat. Just as the flight attendant, a young woman with a kind smile named Sarah, leaned over to offer the man a drink, Ms. Sterling's voice, razor-sharp and dripping with thinly veiled annoyance, sliced through the air. "Excuse me," she began, her tone a calculated blend of politeness and condescension. "Are you sure you're in the right seat? This is first class. Perhaps there's been a mistake. The service staff usually sits in the back." The man, who had been quietly gazing out the window at the receding cityscape of New York, slowly turned his head towards her. His eyes, though, framed by faint lines of fatigue, held a surprising, almost unsettling depth. He didn't react immediately, didn't flinch or show any sign of anger. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable. The silence that descended upon our section of the cabin was suddenly heavy, thick with unspoken judgment and the palpable discomfort of several passengers, myself included, who shifted awkwardly in our seats. Sarah froze, her drink tray suspended. In mid-air, her smile replaced by a look of bewildered apprehension. The air around us felt charged, a silent brewing storm despite the calm, clear morning outside. Below, the sprawling concrete jungle of New York City, usually so vibrant, began to shrink, swallowed by a thick blanket of clouds as the plane began its powerful, undeniable ascent, carrying with it a silent brewing storm within its metallics. Shell. The cabin air grew thick with a palpable tension, heavier than the humidity of a New York summer. Ms. Sterling, emboldened by the man's complete lack of immediate response, mistook his calm for submission. She pressed on, her voice now adopting a saccharine, patronizing tone of fake helpfulness. "Look, "I'm sure it's an honest mistake," she said, her words dripping with a condescension that made my skin crawl. "But these seats are quite expensive. I wouldn't want you to be charged extra, or worse, cause a delay for everyone else." She even managed to offer a thin, condescending smile, a calculated gesture of false concern. The man simply met her gaze, his expression an unreadable canvas. He slowly, deliberately, reached into his well-worn duffel bag. My muscles tensed, expecting a frustrated sigh, a mumbled apology, perhaps even an angry retort. Instead, he pulled out a well-worn, dog-eared paperback novel, a dense-looking historical fiction by the looks of it, and calmly opened it. He began to read, his eyes scanning the page, completely, utterly ignoring her. It was a masterful display of silent defiance, more powerful than any shouted argument could have been. This deliberate indifference visibly infuriated Ms. Sterling. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowed, and a deep, angry red began to creep up her neck and cheeks, clashing with her designer scarf. She let out a sharp, frustrated huff like a startled cobra and dramatically turned away from him. With a flourish that bordered on comical, she pulled out her own sleek, expensive tablet, furiously tapping at the screen. She tried to project an air of sophisticated indifference, leaning back in her seat, but her rigid posture, the way her jaw was clenched tight enough to grind teeth, and the rapid, almost violent taps on her screen betrayed her simmering rage. "Sarah?" The flight attendant approached cautiously once more, her movements hesitant. "Is everything all right here, ma'am, sir?" she asked, her voice hushed, almost apologetic. Ms. Sterling immediately seized the opportunity, her voice regaining its sharp edge. "Everything is perfectly fine," she asserted, sending a venomous, almost reptilian glance at the man engrossed in his book. "Just a minor seating confusion that seems to be resolved." Sarah nodded, her eyes darting between them, clearly sensing the lingering, unspoken hostility that hung in the air like a thick fog. She offered the man a drink again, and he politely, with a small shake of his head, declined, still engrossed in his book. As the plane reached its cruising altitude, the usual hum of conversation slowly returned, though it remained noticeably subdued around our row. Passengers whispered, casting furtive glances in their direction, their curiosity piqued. I couldn't help but feel a growing intrigue about the boss. Quiet man. What was his story? Who was he? And why was Miss Sterling so quick to judge someone based purely on their appearance? The vast, clear blue sky outside the window, stretching endlessly towards the horizon, seemed to mock the small, enclosed drama unfolding within the cabin, a stark contrast between boundless freedom and human narrow-mindedness. Below, the sprawling American landscape began its slow, majestic shift from the structured grids of distant cities to the undulating, open expanses of plains and deserts, a journey as long and complex as the human interactions playing out thousands of feet above them. The tension in the cabin, however, remained thick and oppressive, a constant, unspoken reminder of the unresolved conflict between two starkly different worlds, two opposing perspectives. The flight continued, a simmering cauldron of unspoken tension. Ms. Sterling, though outwardly engaged with her tablet, periodically shot scathing, icy glances at the man beside me. He, for his part, remained an island of calm, utterly absorbed in his book, seemingly oblivious to her silent venom. Time stretched, marked only by the gentle rhythm of the plane. Then, a few hours into the flight, the atmosphere on the plane began to shift, subtly at first, then more dramatically. We hit unexpected turbulence. It wasn't violent, not the kind that sends coffee cups flying, but it was persistent. A continuous, unsettling jostling that caused drinks to slosh precariously in their glasses and nerves to fray. The once gentle hum of the engines now sounded strained, almost a groan. Suddenly, with a disquieting flicker, the main cabin lights pulsed, dimmed, and then settled into a lower, more ominous glow. An announcement crackled over the intercom. The pilot's voice, usually so confident and measured, now carrying an undeniable strain. "Folks," he began, a noticeable catch in his throat, "we're experiencing some minor technical difficulties. Nothing critical, but for precautionary measures, we'll be diverting to the nearest major airport for an unscheduled landing. We appreciate your patience and understanding." A collective gasp, sharp and sudden, went through the cabin. The calm professionalism of the crew, usually so reassuring, was barely concealing their underlying concern. Passengers immediately began to murmur, their whispered anxieties growing louder, some openly expressing their fear, their faces etched with worry. Miss Von Sterling, who had been so composed and in control just moments before, looked visibly shaken. Her perfectly coiffed hair seemed to droop slightly, and she clutched the armrests of her seat with a grip so tight her knuckles turned white. Her phone now useless as connectivity dropped, a symbol of her sudden helplessness. Amidst the rising tide of fear and uncertainty, the man beside her remained surprisingly serene. He calmly closed his book, placing it neatly on his tray table, his movements unhurried and precise. He wasn't fumbling for his phone, wasn't showing any outward signs of distress or panic. Instead, he simply observed the growing unease around him, his gaze calm, steady, almost analytical. It was a stark contrast to the agitated faces around him, a quiet anchor in a sea of anxiety. Then a sudden sharp jolt, more violent than anything before. The plane dipped abruptly, sending a ripple of fear through the cabin. A few unsecured items clattered from the overhead bins. Cries of alarm erupted, sharp and piercing. The flight. Attendants, usually so composed, looked visibly stressed, their smiles gone, their voices strained as they tried desperately to reassure everyone. In that moment of shared visceral fear when composure was a luxury few could afford, the man beside Miss Sterling finally spoke. His voice, calm and clear, cut through the rising clamor, a quiet anchor in the storm. "It'll be all right," he said, his words directed not just at Miss Sterling, but at the cabin in general. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a strange, almost hypnotic authority that commanded immediate attention. Miss Sterling, startled by his unexpected words and the calming timbre of his voice, looked at him, her fear momentarily overshadowing her ingrained disdain. The plane continued its bumpy, unsettling descent, the clouds outside thickening into a dense, oppressive gray, obscuring any view of the ground, reinforcing the sense of being isolated and vulnerable. A fragile aluminum shell hurtling through, an unpredictable sky mirroring the uncertainty in every passenger's mind. The diversion landing was undeniably bumpy, a hard thud that sent a jolt through every passenger. But mercifully, we were safe. We touched down at a regional airport that felt like it was nestled in the middle of nowhere, a small, sleepy outpost with a single, dimly lit terminal. The pilot's voice, now a little more relaxed, announced a significant delay for unexpected maintenance. The cabin door, after a long, tense wait, finally hissed open, releasing the pent-up frustration of hundreds of delayed travelers. The chaos that followed was immediate and overwhelming. Passengers, already on edge from the unexpected. Turbulence and diversion erupted in a cacophony of complaints and demands. They surged into the aisle, phones pressed to ears despite the poor signal, demanding answers, immediate rebookings, loudly complaining about missed connections, crucial meetings, and ruined travel plans. Ms. Sterling, her initial fear quickly replaced by a surge of renewed indignation, was among the loudest, her voice cutting through the din as she demanded to speak to someone in charge immediately, her polished facade finally cracking under the pressure of the unexpected delay and the complete disruption to her meticulously planned schedule. Her frustration was raw, almost primal. A few uniformed ground crew members and airport personnel, looking grim and clearly overwhelmed, boarded the plane. They were noticeably unprepared for the sheer scale of the disruption and the tidal wave of agitated passengers. The flight attendants, their faces etched with exhaustion, looked utterly swamped, trying desperately to manage the mounting anger and fear. It was in this moment of absolute, unbridled chaos, when every sense was assaulted by the noise and confusion, that the man beside Ms. Sterling moved. Slowly, deliberately, with a quiet grace that belied his unassuming appearance, he reached into the inner pocket of his worn work jacket. He pulled out a leather wallet. Not a sleek designer model, but a practical, well-used one, its edges softened by time. From it he retrieved something small, metallic, and circular, something that gleamed dully under the dim, flickering cabin lights. He didn't make a grand theatrical gesture. He simply held it up, calmly, for all to see. A badge. It was unmistakably a federal agent's badge, specifically the distinctive emblem of the FBI. He didn't need to speak a single word. The mere sight of it, held so calmly in his steady hand, amidst the utter bedlam, sent an immediate, almost eerie wave of silence through the entire first-class cabin. It was as if an invisible hand had hit a mute button. Miss Sterling, who had been mid-sentence, her face contorted in a furious demand for a reroute, froze mid-syllable. Her mouth hung slightly open, her perfectly made-up eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief, dawning comprehension, and a sudden chilling horror. The flight attendants, who had been trying to quell the rising tide of complaints with strained smiles, also went rigid, their faces paling dramatically, their eyes fixed on the glinting metal. The sheer unexpectedness of it, the quiet undeniable authority emanating from the man they had all silently or openly judged and dismissed, was overwhelming. The previously bustling, angry cabin was now utterly, completely still, the only sound the muffled shouts and continued chaos from economy class behind the curtain, and the distant, almost ghostly hum of the idling plane on the tarmac. The harsh, fluorescent lights of the small regional airport waiting outside seemed to cast a stark, unforgiving glow on the silent, stunned faces within the first-class cabin, exposing the raw truth of their immediate, unthinking judgment. The silence in first class was not just profound. It was deafening, a palpable weight that pressed down on every passenger. Every eye was fixed on the man, then on the badge that had just materialized in his hand, then back to the man, as if trying to reconcile the two starkly different images. Ms. Sterling's face, a moment ago flushed with indignation, was now utterly drained of all color, her earlier arrogance replaced by an almost agonizing mix of palpable shock, profound embarrassment, and a dawning, suffocating shame. The FBI agent, for that's what he undeniably was, calmly, almost methodically, repocketed his badge. He then turned his head slowly to Miss Sterling. His earlier tired eyes were now sharp, deeply observant, missing nothing. He didn't gloat, didn't chastise her with a single harsh word, didn't even raise his voice. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet, almost a whisper, yet it resonated with an undeniable, almost intimidating authority that cut through the lingering tension. "I understand unforeseen circumstances can be frustrating, ma'am," he said, his gaze unwavering, holding hers. "But professionalism and respect are expected, especially in situations that require calm and cooperation from everyone." His words, soft as they were a perfectly aimed dart, hitting their mark with devastating precision. He then turned his attention to the visibly flustered flight attendants, who were still rigid with shock. "Is there an issue we can assist with?" he asked, his tone shifting imperceptibly to one of quiet competence, of someone ready to take charge. His presence immediately brought a remarkable sense of order to the previously chaotic scene. The ground crew who had just stepped onto the plane recognized his authority instantly. They deferred to him, their own expressions shifting from overwhelmed to respectful. Within minutes, the agent was calmly coordinating with them, assessing the situation with precise questions, and helping to disseminate accurate, reassuring information to the anxious passengers. He moved with a quiet efficiency, his years of training evident in his composed demeanor amidst the lingering chaos. He wasn't putting on a show, wasn't seeking recognition. He was simply a highly trained professional doing his job, but his actions had a profound and immediate impact. Ms. Sterling watched him, utterly humbled, her gaze fixed on his calm, capable movements. She didn't say a word, didn't attempt another complaint or excuse. Her carefully constructed image of superiority, her entire persona had crumbled before her eyes, exposed as shallow and ill-informed. The man she had so casually dismissed as service staff, someone beneath her notice, was in fact a guardian of public safety, a figure of significant authority and quiet power. The subtle shift in the cabin's atmosphere was remarkable. Passengers, who had been loudly complaining, were now quiet, many of them reflecting on their own snap judgments, on the ease with which they, too, had probably dismissed the man based solely on his appearance. I saw a few exchange embarrassed glances, a silent acknowledgment of their shared complicity. The incident served as a potent, unforgettable reminder that appearances can be profoundly deceiving, and that true worth, integrity, and competence often lie hidden beneath the surface, far from the superficial glitters of wealth and status. As we eventually deplaned, transferred to a different aircraft, and finally, hours later, continued our journey to Los Angeles, the first-class cabin was a far more subdued, respectful, and reflective place. Ms. Sterling sat quietly, avoiding eye contact, her earlier brashness replaced by a quiet, profound introspection. The agent, having helped stabilize the situation with his calm expertise, had vanished as quietly as he had revealed himself, leaving behind not just a cleared pathway, but a profound, uncomfortable, and enduring lesson on the weight of immediate judgment and the unexpected quiet power of true integrity. The bright, golden California sun, finally piercing through the plane windows as we began our descent, seemed to illuminate not just the vast, sprawling land below, but also the lingering reflections in the hearts and minds of those who had witnessed the unexpected insignia.